Hi everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel RatherBeReading, and today I'm bringing to you my February mid-month wrap-up. In the first half of February, I managed to complete 7 books. That's a little below my average, but I have, if you've been watching my reading vlogs, which I'll link both of the 2 reading vlogs for the first half of the month down below for you guys, I have had a really busy kind of time with work, so I definitely haven't got as much reading done as I normally would, but hopefully things will pick up in the second half of February. So in this video today, I will just be going over the 7 books that I did read from the 1st through the 14th of February. So let's jump straight in and talk about all 7 books. The first book I completed in the month of February was Choosing Charleston by T. Lynn Ocean. I read this book off my Kindle, and it's a women's fiction chick lit type novel about a woman who is living in New York with her husband. They've been married about a year when she discovers that her husband has been cheating on her, and she moves back to her hometown of Charleston to where her family lives, basically to be with her family. And her father's business, he runs a small business, and there is this big development going on across the street which is basically going to put him out of business, and she butts heads with this man who she meets who's basically a construction worker on the site of this new development. There's a lot of kind of other things going on in there, but that's the main premise of it. I didn't love this book. It had a lot of issues. I thought it was very cringy. The romance in it was not great at all. There was, for this type of book, it felt like the type of book that's primarily focused on the romance, it didn't have very much romance in it at all. The romantic elements between the characters don't start until quite late into the book, but then by the end of the book, they have already said, "I love you," or at least one of them has. And I was just yeah, wasn't great. The kind of villain that's put into this was a very cringe villain that I was just cartoonish almost in how villainous they tried to make this person. I just thought it was really over the top. So overall, definitely not my favorite women's fiction book I've ever read. In the end, I gave that 2.5 stars. I then listened on audio to Are You There Alone by Susan O'Malley. This one is narrated by Becky Ann Baker. This is a true crime novel about a woman named Andrea Yates who did drown all 5 of her children in a bathtub, killing them all. And this book is about it's about the court case, but not in trying to convict her because it's undisputed that she committed the crime, but about her plea of insanity, basically, and about was she completely responsible for these acts. This is a very, very sad book. Obviously, you're dealing with the deaths of 5 children, which is completely horrific. And on top of that, it really does highlight a lot of the issues in the mental health system and how much this woman was let down. She was suffering from quite severe postpartum depression and was going through different forms of psychosis, and she just really didn't get the help that she needed. And while she is obviously responsible for this act that she committed, it's very sad that I personally feel like it wouldn't have got to the point that it did get with her murdering her children if she had received the help that she needed. So that's really sad, and it was very hard to listen to, but it did have some interesting stuff in it, and in the end I gave that one 3.5 stars. Next, I read World After by Susan E. This is the 2nd book in the Penryn and the End of Days trilogy. I didn't love this one quite as much as book 1, but I did still really like it. This series is just so kind of dark and gritty, but it has a real kind of underlying tone of a real dark humor, which I really appreciate. So I didn't love it quite as much as book 1, but I did still really enjoy it, and in the end I gave this 3.75 stars. I then read Exile for Dreamers by Kathleen Baldwin. This is the 2nd book in the Strange House series. The first book I gave it 3.25 stars, so I enjoyed it, but it didn't capture me enough that I had just already decided going into this book that if I didn't really enjoy this one, I wasn't going to continue with the series. I did enjoy this one more than the first one. I but I just enjoy the main character of this one. This one follows Tess as opposed to the first book, which followed Georgie. And while I did like Georgie, I liked Tess better as a character, and I really liked the romance in this one a little better. This one also gave us a really nice hint of a mystery that I think is going to come to play in the third book, which I'm really looking forward to kind of finding out what's going on with that. So I will be continuing with the series, and I definitely think this one was an improvement on the previous book, and I also gave this book 3.5 stars. Next on audio, I listened to The Animators by Carla Ray Whitaker. This one is narrated by Alex McKenna. Alex McKenna has narrated another book that I have listened to, which was My Absolute Darling by Gabriel Talent, which is a book that I didn't enjoy, but I do actually quite enjoy Alex McKenna as a narrator. This book I enjoyed. It has its issues. It's a debut novel, and I thought it was a pretty good debut. It's a literary fiction basically about two women who meet in college and who are animators, and it's just kind of a literary story kind of about their lives. One of them is more the focus of the story than the other, and I really thought that they were pretty complex characters, which I really liked, and it was a very interesting kind of friendship dynamic between them. The main issue that I thought this book had was basically just the pacing. I thought that overall the book was probably too long, and because it was too long, it did suffer from some slow parts of the story. But it was a pretty enjoyable story. It also has my pet peeve in it, and that something was mentioned in the synopsis that didn't happen until quite a ways into the book. But there was this other big event that happened that wasn't in the synopsis, which I don't think it needed to be, but the event that was in the synopsis happened even after that event. So just generally in terms of like the marketing and the blurb, I thought this book was a little bit off, but I did still enjoy it overall, and I gave that one 3.5 stars. And I then read End of Days by Susan E. This is the final book in the Penryn and the End of Days trilogy. I did enjoy this as well. It's my least favorite probably of the trilogy. I only rated this one a 3.75 out of 5 stars. From what I understand, this was originally supposed to be a 5-book series, and for whatever reason, it ended up only being a trilogy, and the ending did feel a little bit rushed. For me, the main part that felt rushed was the romance. Throughout the first 2 books, one of my favorite parts about the series was that there's romance parts in it, but it's very slow burn and very understated in my opinion. And then it felt like in this book, the author felt like she really had to like kind of crank it up because it was ending, like the book was ending. So it got a little bit over the top a little bit for me in this one, just compared to, and it probably wasn't, you know, out of line with romances that we see in other YA, you know, trilogies, but just from what we'd seen in the first 2 books, it was just a little bit over the top. Again, really dark, really gritty. Overall, I think this trilogy is definitely worth checking out, and I did really enjoy it. And as I mentioned, I gave this one 3.75 stars. And the final book that I read in the first half of February was The Girl Before by Rena Olson. This one I also listened to on audio and is narrated by Brittany Presley. This one is tagged as being a thriller. I don't think it's a thriller. It has some thriller kind of aspects, but it's more literary in my opinion. The beginning of the story is very fast-paced and kind of hooks you in immediately. You have this woman who is in a room brushing the hair of this little girl who she's referring to as her daughter, when the police bust in and her husband is being arrested, and it becomes pretty evident that these children that are in the house are not their children, and that, you know, there's this whole kind of situation going on. It then becomes evident that this woman was raised by her husband's parents, like from when she was a little girl, and was raised in this lifestyle, and then she ended up marrying her now husband, who takes kind of over the business of basically raising these children to be sold off for a like myriad of different purposes, some as sex slaves, I'm sure, but for a whole like slew of different things. Trigger warnings in this for rape, but particularly domestic abuse. She is in a very controlling domestic abusive relationship. And one of the things I appreciated about it was that the author didn't feel the need to go over the top with everything that's in there. She didn't feel the need to get overly graphic, but at the same time, she really did get across her points. And it has some really interesting commentary in it on how much the main character is a victim and how much she is also culpable in what's gone on, because she is an adult. She raised these children to be, and while she did it in a caring way, she did raise these children to be sold to men for whatever purposes. So she does have some blame in this, but also she's been brainwashed from a very young age. you know, and she was raised in this lifestyle. So it had some really interesting issues in that. It does have some really good commentary in it as well, I thought, on therapy and recovery, which I thought was really great. And the author of this book, I believe, is a trained therapist. So I thought that was really great that it was as well represented as it was, and I presume that is because the author is a therapist. Again, this one is a debut, and I thought it was a pretty good debut novel, and overall I did really enjoy it, and I gave this one 3.75 stars. So those are the books that I read in the first half of February. I would love to chat in the comments down below if you've read any of these books, if you have any thoughts or any books that you've been reading in the beginning of February that you've been really enjoying. I would love to know. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more from my channel. But that's all I've got for this video today. Bye guys!